Alright, I want to show you how to do a toe sock on a long loom with wedges so that you don't have seaming to do. And there's two different options of toes that you can do. You can do the sandal toe. There, you can do the sandal toe, or you can do the all 5 toes. Okay, and I'm going to kind of show you how to go about doing the formula for that. I'm going to be using my universal 3/8 inch gauge loom. Okay, and as you can see, I have 3 wedges. If you only have 2, you can work it. All right, you can, I promise. I just like to move less around, so I'm just going to work with the ones that I have. Okay, so you have a couple of more calculations to do than just your ball and cuff and that kind of, in your length of your foot. You need to actually measure the space around the big toe, the circumference of the big toe, and you need to measure the length of your big toe and what it is to the top of the toe. Alright, and that'll give you the measurements on the actual toes and the big toe. Alright, so that's the big toe length, which is going to work for your toes as well, and you're going to need to measure around all your toes, on not the big toe but the rest of your toes. So the 4 toes that you have left, you're going to need to do a measurement around. So here are the measurements I've got. So if you want to just follow along, if you have these similar measurements, go for it. I'm using 2 strands of a finger wing weight. I put 2 strands of a leaves, but it's 2 strands of a finger wing weight. I'm going to use a bamboo cotton and 1 strand of a leaves, and I'm going to be using red. All right, and that's going to end up being 5 stitches per inch and 10 rows per inch. And I've already done my calculations. I have a ball of 9 inches. I want a cuff of 6 inches, and I have a length of, and that needs to change. It's going to be probably closer to 8 because of the because it's like 9.5 for me in length, so it's probably going to be like 8. And that's standard for, like, if I'm doing an actual heel toe, but doing just the toes themselves, it's going to be a little different. So you figure out your length, because you are going to do a regular heel. You can finish this with a regular tube with no heel. That's an entire choice. I usually like adding a heel. It gives you the option of having to figure out where you need to put your heel as well. So it's up to you. But I put 6.5 for my length, but actually that probably needs to be closer to 8. And the circumference around my big toe is 3 inches, and the circumference around my last 4 toes is 6 inches, and the length of my big toe is 1.75 inches. Okay, so I have a calculation here, a formula, and it's ball times stitches per inch to give your number of pegs. And I ended up getting 45. I'm rounding down to 44 for use, so it can handle going down 1 peg. So I do my number of pegs divided by 2, which gives you half your pegs that you'll be using for your heel, and that ends up being 22 pegs I'll be using for my heel. And number A divided by 3 is number B, which is what I will decrease down to when I go to do my heel. And that was 22 divided by 3 is 7.3. Alright, now I need to do how many pegs I need for my big toe circumference. And that is my big toe circumference times stitches per inch equals number C. And that's 3 times 5 is 15. So I'll need 15 pegs for my big toe. Alright, well, I'm going to be using, I think I'm going to round up to 16. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, yeah. I'm rounding it up to 16 on this. Okay, so because you want it to be an even number, and so I rounded mine up to 16. Okay, then I need to do my toes measurement times my toe circumference measurement by stitches per inch, and that's number D. So that's 6 inches times 5 stitches per inch equals 30. And then I need to figure out my number of rows that I'm going to do for my toes, which is my big toe length times my rows per inch is number E. So that is 1.75 times 10 is 17.5 rows, which means I'll probably do 18 rows. Go ahead and round it up and do 18 rows. Alright, so then I need to figure out let's see, number 26. Okay, now I need to figure out the number of pegs I need between my toes. So I'm going to be doing number D, which was 30, and divide that by 2, which is 15. So I'll actually need 15 pegs that'll be in between my toes. Alright, and then what you want to do is you want to do your total number of pegs for your toes plus the total number of pegs you need in between your toes for a total of G. Then you take number G and divide that by 4, which gives you number H. And what I got here was 30 plus 15 is 45 pegs total that I'll be working with for my toes. Divided by 4 is 11.25. So I'll be working in there. It's not an even number. And so I'll be working around my 44 pegs, but you got to think that these wedges add 2, and so you're actually not having to work outside of your original circumference that you're worked up in here, so you know that. Okay, so what that means, what all this jibber jabber means, is you're going to be, if you're doing your individual toes, what that means is you're going to be doing, okay, this is your big toe, and then you're going to be, once you're done with your big toe, you're going to move those stitches that are on that peg out, and you're going to move this over 1, okay, and that's going to be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So I'm only going to do 2 that are 12 and then 2 that are 10. And that generally averages out to about 11. So there is some gauging in here because you're trying to work up to an even, and that is an odd number. And what I found I could do is a 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and then a 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and then a 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Okay, so 12, 12, and 10, and then that would average out to 11. Okay, that's kind of what you're gauging, and your last 2 toes can have less pegs because they're smaller toes. Okay, so you're going to be gauging in that general department, and your little toes always generally going to have less anyway. And if you follow my other one that's done on a round loom where you're doing the toes flat and then you sew it all together at the end, that video, you stick with the same concept, but you're going to be doing the stitch shuffling, as I call it, where it's 2 stitches that you cast on extra and then you'll decrease down. Okay, so there's a stitch shuffling that's going to go on in there, but this we're going to try to keep it where we don't have so much sewing to do. We can just work it. Okay, but there is a video. Follow the same formula, but you're going to be working flat instead of in the round. So basically, if you're going to be working in the round, you're going to have to add a stitch to each end. So instead of be working in circularly, you're just going to be working back and forth. And you're going to work back and forth however many rows you calculated, okay? And it's going to work the same thing with the toes. So follow the general rule of thumb that I did a couple of years ago with the toe socks. You're just going to keep up with this formula, and you're going to do some stitch shuffling to create enough space for your toes like you're supposed to have. But I like the idea of working with a loom where I can do like a Kitchener cast on with my toe, and I can do, you know, my 18 rows and then go to the next toe, Kitchener cast on, and keep it to where all I had to do is type my Kitchener and you don't see anything. It's really nice and smooth. So that's the idea of this. I'm going to show you both methods of how to do the toes. So I'm going to show you the method of doing all 5 toes. I'm going to show you the method of doing the actual sandal toe. Okay, so I'm actually going to start off showing you how to do the toe. And I've already calculated out, and I decided I would round up to 16 because I have to work with even numbers. Okay, and I'm still working with a total of 44 pegs. These are 44 pegs right here. Alright, so what I want to do is I want to do a Kitchener cast on, and I'm going to do the opposite side. And what I'm going to do is wrap it front to back, and then go over here, front to back, front to back, front to back. I'm going to do that all the way across. And doing little Kitchener cast-ons in this kind of method, you're not going to be losing that much. And if you're doing it the flat method, then you're just going to do basically E-wrap cast on. But with this, we don't want any seaming to show up. Alright? Alright, so then what you want to do is you want to knit your way around. I'm basically going to be doing stockinette for most of this until I get up to the cuff. Then I'm going to switch over to a rib stitch. So we're not going to do anything fancy stitch work. We're just going to do a stockinette. So you're just going to knit your way around. Make sure you get the full stitch over, or it won't tighten as nicely as you need it to. Okay. And I may need to try grabbing my starting Kitchener again. It can be fun because you are working a tighter area. Okay. And then knit that over. Okay. This will be your first round. And this is going to work the same whether you're doing the sandal version or the full toe version. Okay, so this is the same on both. So I probably won't show this again when I go to do all the toes and then the sandal toe. Okay. Alright, so I have worked my way around for my first row. I'm going to do 18 rows. So go ahead and pause the video and get your 18 rows done, and then we will go from there. Okay, as you can see, we have completed our 18 rows. You can just kind of pull that through. And there is your toe. Okay. So there's your toe. And do keep in mind, you can do this method when making gloves. You just have to do different measurements. You have to measure each finger and its length and that kind of thing. You can do the similar thing to gloves if you'd like. Alright, I've done this before. Okay, so now that we have completed our toe, our big toe, what we want to do is we want to take these stitches off and place them onto the outer pegs. Alright, and we want to place them out of the way. Alright, and that opens up those two pegs. Okay, alright, now what we want to do now is we want to loosen up and move it in one, or you can take it out completely and flip it around so that the wedges are actually facing where you want them. And I'm going to take it out completely and face it this way because I like the wedges facing where they're easy, and I can do that. It's not affecting anything to do that. Okay, and you will have some overlap, but because these things are so small, it's okay. Alright, so we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Alright, now we're going to work our next toe. Now, you see how I have done that, right? And when you go in to start working the actual foot down more, you will be doing Kitchener where you're tightening it up. Okay, so now we're ready to move on to the next toe, and this toe process pretty much works the same. You will need to kind of cut your yarn, okay, for each toe. I hate personally doing this. It's not something I like to do, is cut the yarn, but that is the best method of doing this. Now, if you don't want to cut the yarn, you can knit your way around, and then you can leave a big old space, and you can do the Kitchener again, okay, and then you can work your way around, and then you'll just have to snip and weave in later. I've done that before too. If you don't want to sit there and cut your yarn and reattach, cut your yarn and reattach, you can do a rigged system. Alright, and I can show you this rigged system, where what you do is you go in and you knit your way around, okay. And when you get to that where you moved the stitch over, you'll just go ahead and knit both those stitches together. So you just knit those together. Okay, now, then what you want to do is you want to go in and just skip as much as you can and just weave it. So front, back, front, back, front, back. And the calculation's still the same. It's 18. If you want to measure them out where it's really perfect, you can measure out each individual toe if you so choose, to make sure that the length, because naturally the more you go over to your little toe, the shorter it gets. So if you want to go in and measure each toe and find out its length, calculate the rows per inch, you can. That's not difficult. You just go to the base and measure. But for it being next beside the big toe, it's going to be 18 again. Okay, but it may vary if you're going in. So you can measure individually, but do know it's probably going to be a little big if you choose on the pinky and the one next to the pinky toe. It can be excessively long. So you can measure each individual toe. Might be a good plan. Measure each individual toe just like you did the one, and you do the same equation. You multiply that number by your stitches per inch, by your rows per inch, and you get how many rows you need, okay? That's if you're doing like gloves and stuff. So you measure from here to here, here to here, here to here. And that's what you'll do on the individual toes, okay? And you'll get where it's a perfect fit on all your toes, okay? You can do that method. But now if you're doing the sandal type, you aren't going to have so much calculating to do. You just do 18 rows. All right. So now that we've done that, you can go in and knit your way around and do 18 rows there. Okay, but when you go in to tighten your cast on this one, you can snip the ends and weave them in later. Alright, and this saves you from having to cut and reattach, cut and reattach. Alright, this is just an idea for you. Make sure you get all that stitch over when you go in to knock those loops over, because if you don't, it'll affect your tighten on, your cast on. Alright, so toss the loop and toss the loop, and I will actually pause the video, get your 18 rows done, and I will actually measure my next 3 toes so that we get an accurate thing, and I'll explain how to do it. So measure the next 3 toes so you have an accuracy of length in each individual toe. Okay, so pause the video, get your 18 rows done, and then we will go from there. Okay, I've done my 18 rows. Okay, and again I want to take and move this stitch over to this peg, and this stitch over to, if that gives you trouble and you're doing the technique that I'm doing, go ahead and kind of knit your way over, which you can move this stitch over because it's going to need to be moved over. Toss that bottom loop and knit your way over, and knit both those stitches over. Okay, and that should loosen it up to where the peg stitch moves over, just like that. There we go. See, moved over nicely. All right, now you will need to move these two stitches over like you did the other. Okay, not difficult. And then you'll need to take out this, which will be a little challenge, but not much of one. Okay, then you can pull that down. That's your next toe. And then what I'll do, instead of taking this one out, I'm just going to move it over. And so this is going to be, you're going to put a stitch marker there. You're going to put a wedge there. So I'm going to put a wedge there. That counts as 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12. Alright, and then you're going to tighten that back up. And then you're going to put this one where it goes. Okay. Now, is this tedious? Of course it is. But sometimes tedious things in life end up being a cool effect. Alright? So you pull that down, and there's your next toe. Okay, so those are going to generally be the same size, so you know. Alright? I'll push that down. So now we have a big toe, and we have the next toe, which I'm going to call the index toe because it would be your index finger. Then we're going to do the middle toe. And my middle toe was 1.5 inches, and 1.5 times 10, which is your rows per inch, ends up being like 14 and something, and I rounded up to 15 rows. And my ring and pinky toe are the same length, which was 1.25 times the rows per inch is 10 times the 10 rows per inch, and that gave me like 12 point something, and I rounded it up to 13 rows. So just as you did the method to figure out your big toe, you do the same method with your measurements on all the lengths of your toes. For that, you do the same formula for that to figure out each and every toe. Okay, so I'm using 12 here, and then the next two will be 10. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cast on the 12, and I'm going to do 15 rows. Okay, so I'm going to move that over and start my Kitchener like I normally would. So you should be getting the idea of this at this point, that you do your Kitchener cast on for your little short toe. Okay. And actually I find when you don't cut it, that connector makes it easier to do, where you don't have to sit there and fill trying to get your tail. And so you're just going to knit around. Make sure you get it all over, so that when you go to tighten it, it does it where it's supposed to. So the method works the same for every toe, but on the next one it's only going to be 10 pegs rather than 12. Alright. So at this point, you want to pause the video and complete your 15 rows, and then we'll move to the next toe, and then we'll move to the next toe, okay? So at this point, we'll have 3 toes done, and you'll see your Kitchener there. Okay, so you can stick your fingers in those. Alright, so pause the video, complete 15 rows, or however many rows you're doing depending on your toe length. Okay, mine for my index toe was the same. This is the middle toe. It was 1.5 inches, so I'm doing 15 rows. Okay, pause the video, get your 15 rows done if you're following along with me, or however many rows you need to do, and then we'll go from there. Okay, we have finished our middle toe, and now we want to start moving our stitches over. So we're going to move that one stitch over, and we're going to kind of do like we did with the first one. We're going to knit that stitch, move it over, toss that bottom loop over, and then knit your way over, and then knit those 2 stitches over, and that'll make it easier to go ahead and move these stitches over one, and this one can get moved over one easily enough too. And then what we want to do is we want to, you'll see that they're overlapped down here. What you want to do is you want to move that over. So you know there's going to be 2 pegs there, so there's 2, and then 4, 6, 8, 10. So we're going to move it all the way to here. And yes, it's going to overlap, so you know. Okay, then you're going to whittle your way, your wedge out, and put it down here. Put it right here. And yes, you're going to have 3 stacked on top of each other. Sorry. Okay, we can move that out. Alright, so we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and then 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Okay, so we'll actually go ahead and do a 12 for that one as well. So I'm going to pull that through. So there is 3 toes done, 2 more left to go. Alright, and I calculated that my last 2 toes were 1.25 inches, and so I divided that by 10, which is my rows per inch, and I got 13 rows. So my next 2 should be 13 rows, alright? So we're going to do 12 this one, and then we're going to do 10 on this one, okay? And that should cover us on our toes. So since this one is basically the same as this one, you're just doing 13 rows rather than 15. So go ahead and pause the video, get your next toe done, but you're going to do 13 rows rather than 15, and then I'll show you the last pinky toe. Okay, I've already set up for my last toe, and I actually realized I've miscalculated. It was supposed to have been 11. So what I'll need to do is do a slight adjustment. Okay, and then I will decrease it back to 44. So I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. All right. So that actually needs to be 10 stitches for that one, or you can do this method where you just take it back 1 and then you'll decrease it down. It's not difficult to decrease down. Okay, so what you're going to do now is the same process that you did for your other toes. You Kitchener cast on. You're just doing 10 pegs instead of 12. Okay, so you just do 10 instead of 12. And again, it's going to be 13 rows. Okay, so we'll just go in and make sure we toss our entire loop over. There. Alright, so go ahead and pause the video and do 13 rows so that you can get your pinky toe done. Okay, and then I will show you how to continue on from here to where you start working the length of your sock. Okay. Okay, so pause the video, get your 13 rows done of 10 pegs, and then you will put these pegs out like you've been doing, but you're not going to mess with these. In fact, I'm going to show you how to correct what I've done on changing it to where it's back down to 44 pegs. Not a difficult thing. I'll show you how to do that. So go ahead and do your 13 rows, and then we'll come back and we'll finish up and we'll start working on the bulk of the actual. Okay, we have finished our last one and we need to set it up. So I'm going to go ahead and move this stitch over one. And toss the bottom loop over like we've been doing. And then we want to move this stitch over like we've been doing as well. And now we want to take out all of our wedges at this point. And that covers how to do each and every little toe. Now to finish this, I'll explain how to do this. Now, you'll have a set of 2 stitches on the other side. Now we want to be able to kind of, when the stitches relax, the toes start connecting. So this is where it's going to help to know what you're up to. Okay, so I know we're off by like 2 pegs, but I'll fix that in a couple of rows. Okay, so at this point what we want to do is we want to knit over, and then we'll knit these 2. Okay, and I kind of show this on the where you're doing it on the round loom, where you're doing it all flat. Okay, now what you want to do is when you get to here, you'll want to move that stitch over one, because that's your bottom stitch right here. Knit that over, then go over here and knit this one over, and then take it back one. Okay, then you want to knit this top one over because it's the next closest one. Again, when the stitches relax, you should not have holes showing up. Alright, and then you're going to move that one over and knit that one over, and then move that stitch back. So there's a little stitch shuffling, but you're trying to make it to where there's no hole when the stitches relax. Okay? And then you're going to knit your way over to the next dual stitches. You're going to take that top stitch off, move it over to the next peg. Then you're going to knit that bottom stitch, and then knit that stitch you moved, and then you're going to move it back one, and then you're going to knit the top stitch because it's a double stitch as well. Okay, so then you're going to knit that top stitch over, and you're going to move it over one, then you're going to knit that next one, and you're going to move that over, and then you're going to knit two. And you don't have to, you could just knit all these over, but it just helps close that hole in a little bit that'll be there. Once the stitches relax, you knit and go over and knit that and move that back over. Knit your top stitch. Oops. Make sure that goes back. Knit that top stitch. Move it over. Knit that bottom stitch. Then you're going to move that stitch back. Okay, and then you're going to knit your way over two. And this should be the last time you have to shuffle your stitches around. So knit that, knit the one you moved, move it back, knit the top one, move it over, knit the bottom, and move that stitch back that way, and then you're going to knit your way to your starting point, okay, which is right here. Alright, now it is now time to officially connect all your toes together. So what you're going to do is you're going to knit your way around for one round. Now where you didn't cut the yarn, do keep in mind that stitch may be loose, but it'll get tightened when you go in to actually do your Kitchener and you start needing to weave those ends in and tie them off and that kind of thing. And the cut thing is where you can help close in any holes there are after the stitches relax. Okay, so just gonna knit your way around. And on this round, you'll go ahead and knit those two stitches together. Okay. And you're back to your starting point. Okay. And I'm going to actually knit one more round. And this time I'm going to actually move in my wedge because I had done the extra, and I'm actually going to shift the stitches all over by one and decrease it that way. And that way it doesn't make my toe area any smaller. So I'm going to shift those 3 stitches over by one. And that shouldn't close it off. Okay. Now I'm going to knit my row, and then after I knit my row and decrease those so that we're back down to 44 pegs, then we'll be ready to start our length. Okay, and we will be ready to do that. Now I'm going to show you how you want to close up these ends of these toes. I'm going to show you how to do that, and then you're just going to knit for however many rows your length is. So when we get to these, you're going to knit both those stitches over, and then knit your way around. And again, these holes should start to relax more the further down the length you get, and you start stretching and relaxing those stitches. Right now they're very stretched. But again, when you go in and do the Kitchener, you have an excess amount to be able to weave in and try closing those holes up a little bit as well. Okay, so we have done a round, and now we are ready to just knit our length. So we are prepped and ready to just knit our length. So we figured out our toes. Alright, now I'm going to show you how to go in and tighten at least the thumb, and each toe is going to be the same. Now, we know our starting point was over here, so we know that we need to go to the opposite side. So, pull that, and then we know this is the next one, and we're going to pull it gently. Then we're going to hunt down that next one, pull it gently, and then hunt down that next one, pull it gently, and you'll know the ones you're supposed to be pulling because you'll see it start to tighten where it should. And then you're going to find your next section. You're going to pull it gently to tighten. And remember the mountain, okay? Up, down, and up and down. Now, keep in mind your end is in here somewhere. We might need to be pulling that through because it's going to be a distraction. So, okay. I'll shove that back down. Okay, now we're back to hunting our stuff down. Okay. Now we need to find our next section, which it might be a little bit more complicated because I did 2 strands at a time, but you can figure it out and gently tuck it. Okay. And find your next 2 and gently tuck. And there. Gently tuck. There. Okay, then you want to find your next section. Again, this may be a little challenging if you did what I did, where you chose to do a non-stretch and a stretch. But if you're seasoned at this, it's not going to be difficult. If you're not, then you might want to try and find, do a different type of dual yarn. Okay. but you want to do gentle tugs to find your next sets. Just want to work this all the way over. You're going to do this with every single toe. Let's see. Now, I notice I'm finding a little weird of a section, but I know my end is actually up in here. And then we're just going to pull that. Okay, so there is your toe. Okay, when it's all finished and the weave is done. Alright, and when that is done, you can actually go in and snip that and do some weaving. Okay, now it's going to work a little differently. You'll remember that you have your excess here, but what you want to do is start on this side and work your way over. Start on this side and work your way over. Okay, but your toes should end up looking like that. Now, if you don't want this method, if you don't want to deal with the Kitchener and everything, you can actually do the drawstring and drawstring all your toes together if you so choose. Okay. Most people do know the drawstring cast on if they're doing this level of difficulty. So if you don't want to do the Kitchener, you are more than welcome to actually go in and do the drawstring. And you'll just have little drawstring ends. Because you're working with so few pegs, it really isn't going to show. Okay, so go ahead and then knit around your length. Alright. My length, I think I found, was, where is it? I do not believe I did that calculation. I know it's going to be 10 rows per inch times, I believe it's going to be probably about 8. Because that covers an inch of the end, so probably 8 inches, so 10 times 8 is 80 rows. So I'm going to do approximately 80 rows in the round. Your foot may be shorter. You want to measure up under the toe to just 1.5 inches in front of the heel, okay? And that's your measurement on how many rows you need to do times 10. So that whatever that measurement is times 10 gives you how many rows you need to do. That may be affected if you're trying to follow along. You may be needing to gauge from that. Okay, I'm going to show you how to make the sandal sock toe. And it's going to look a little similar to this toe sock, except you're going to do the toe, big toe, the same, and then you're going to be working the rest of the loom to do the rest of your toes. You will be using some of your measurements. You will take your pinky toe measurement and you will calculate up your number of rows, but you will round it down to the next 5 or 10. So I have 13, I'm going to round it down to 10. Then you're going to find out what your middle toe, and because your little middle toe is usually the same size as your big toe, in length, it could be a little smaller. It's going to be around 18 rows. So if you just calculate up your big toe, you're good to work with that. Alright, so you want to minus your big toe on rows from your rounded down on your pinky, and I end up needing 8 rows, okay? Now, naturally, you're going to use your, let's see, where is it? You're going to use your number B, okay, which is 7.3. I need it to be an even number, so, and I want it to be more than, I don't want it to be 6, so I'm going to round it up to 8. Okay, and so what you want to look at is you want to look at 2, 4, 6, 8. That's what you want to decrease down to. But then you have all these pegs over here, and you're only going to be doing 8 decreases. Okay, and there's more pegs than what's going to be there. Okay, so every other peg is going to be a decrease. You might want to place stitch markers there until you get 8 decreases. And then what you want to do once you get the 8 decreases, do a couple of rows, and then you're done with the toe area. Alright, so let's get started with that. I've already done my big toe. Okay, so I'm going to Kitchener cast on. Okay, I'm going to shove those down. Now I don't cut the yarn because it makes it a little easier not to have to go fishing for it. It's placed until I'm done tightening everything. Now for me, I went ahead and I went ahead and tightened my toe in the end there. But it makes it easier when you go to work around, not going ahead and cutting it. Alright, so we've kitchen cast on our way around. And what we want to do is we want to knit for 10 rounds just this section. Okay, so just to finish setting up, you're going to knit all your pegs. Again, always make sure you get all of the yarn over. If you only do a partial, you're going to have a mess when you go to tighten up. Okay, at this point you'll want to do 10 rows. So I'm going to suggest that you go ahead and you pause the video and you complete your 10 rows, or if you've calculated for something else and it's going to be 5, so it's either going to be 5 or 10 rows depending on your size sock you're making. If you're making one for like a teenager or something, then you know it's probably going to, a tween or a preteen, you'll go in and you'll probably end up doing 5 rows, but it's whatever your round down calculation is. Alright, so go ahead and pause the video and complete your 10 rows, and then we will come back and I will show you how the decrease will be done. Okay, I've got my 10 rows done, and I've gone in and I've marked off what my 8 pegs are with a pencil, and then I also marked off my decrease pegs, because what you want to do is you want to mark over the corresponding side. So I marked the next peg as 1, the corresponding side on the other side is 2, skip, 3, 4, skip, 5, 6, skip, 7, 8. Okay, so every other peg, and it's not going all the way over, it's just going part of the way over. Okay, alright, so we're here. Alright, and what we're going to do is we're going to go to our farthest decrease, which is right here. So we're going to come over and we're going to knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, we're going to wrap and turn and then knit our way around to the other side to do a corresponding decrease that way. Okay, so here's our other side, so we're right there. I'm going to wrap and turn, then I'm going to knit my way around to this one. Okay, that would be 18 that I'll have knit around, and then I'm going to wrap and turn because there's my marked peg. Alright, so then I'm going to knit my way around to my corresponding side. And that is knit arounded to my other corresponding side, which is my other marked peg. Alright, and I'm going to knit around to my next marked peg, which is 14 knitted. I'm going to wrap and turn. As you can see, every other peg is wrapped and turned at this point. And we're going to knit away around and wrap and turn the corresponding marked peg on the other side. Alright, wrap and turn. Then we're going to knit our way around. And I believe we're going to have one more on that side and one more decrease on this side. So we're going to knit our way around. Just 10. Wrap and turn. Then knit around to the corresponding side. Okay, and then wrap and turn. Alright, so what you should have is a total of 8 wraps and turns. Okay, and then you're going to knit your way back to your starting point. There's 1, 2, 3, and of course 4. Alright, and then what you're going to do now is you're just going to knit a couple of rounds after it. Okay, so this round will get you back to square one, because you're going to knit those 2 stitches over on those decreased pegs, and then knit those 2 over, knit those 2 over, knit those 2 over, knit those 2 over, and this gets you back to square one of, there's 1 stitch on every single peg, and then just one more round to set it all in place. Then the next thing you're wanting to do is go in and get that wedge out of there and start connecting the 2 sides. Okay, and that's where we're going to be back up to the rest of this video. Alright, where you're just going to follow the sock along for the rest of the video. Okay. Alright, we're now getting to a point where we're wanting to move our peg here out of the way, our stitch here out of the way. So what you want to do is you want to come around and you want to knit it over. Then you want to move it over to this peg, and then you'll knit both those stitches over because you moved them over on the thumb, I mean the big toe, sorry, and then you want to knit your way around. Then you want to move this stitch over to this peg, and then you'll knit those 2 stitches together. Okay, then you should be able to take out your wedge completely. Alright, and then we're going to do one more round. Okay, so we're going to do one more round to get me set back up. Okay, to start doing just regular rounds. Alright, so so what we've just done is knitted those 2 stitches together, and then when you work your way around to the other side, you will knit those 2 stitches together and get to your starting point, which I'll show you where that is. And this should cover you for your sandal sock toe. Okay, here's our knit 2 stitches together, and then knit your way to here and stop. There's your starting point. Now you're ready to work the length of the sock, and you measure it the same way you do the toe sock. Everything else about this comes across exactly the same. That's the difference between the sandal. And then when you get far enough down, you want to go in and you'll tighten up your cast on, and when we get to the end of the video, I show you how to go in and close up this open area here. It's the same thing when you're doing the toes for the toe socks. You're going to close up this area the same exact way. Alright, but that is how you set up your sandal sock. Now, the same thing goes for when you go to do the other sock. You're going to flip the side you do the heel on. So if you're doing the heel on this side the first time for the first sock, then you need to go on the other side and do the heel on the other side. And that way you don't have to mess with all the toes and everything. You're just going in and doing the other foot by just simply flipping which side you do the heel on. Keep that in mind. That is important. You go in and you do all this work and you do the heel on the same side that you did the first one. You're going to have two right or left socks, and you don't want that. So you want to do the opposite side when you do your second sock. It's not difficult. You just work your way around and then start decreasing down. Okay? I remeasured my length, and it was actually 7, and so I ended up doing 70 rows. So, you know. There's my toes, as you can see. Alright. And it'll need to be sewn together a little bit. But when you go in and you tighten up and you have this long strand, you can go in and weave it in and close it in when you're done with the socks. So there is some hole there. But to think you don't have to sew all the way around. Okay. You just got to weave in a few. So I finished my length, and this is what you should have. Alright, and now I'm ready to do my heel. Okay, so we're going to back to our formula. And at this point, you're doing a standard sock. So we're looking at B, and our number B is 7.3, so round down to 7. So we're going to decrease down to 7 single stitches in between your wraps and turns. Okay. And we're only going to use 22 pegs for the heel. Alright. Now, if you want, you can just continue on. You could probably do, say, do the prep for the tube sock and measure up, down, round to the ankle, how much more you'd need for that, and do a tube sock, and then you don't have to worry about the heel. Now, you'll do the toes the same, but keep in mind to get one side for a right sock and a left sock. You'll need to do the opposite side that you do the one heel on. You'll need to do the opposite side of the loom. So for instance, I'm going to do this side of the loom for this heel, but on the next sock I need to do the other side of the loom for the heel, if that makes any sense at all. Alright, so I'm ready to start my heel, and I'm just going to kind of do a pretty standard wrap and turn heel, nothing special. I think I've tried showing all the different ways. I'm not interested in doing a shadow short row heel. I just really don't like the shadow method, but I've shown you about every other method there is. So you're going to knit your way over to peg 21. You can place markers where you need them, but when you're working on a loom like this, you kind of know where your halfway mark is. It's one peg from there. So you're going to knit your way over. Okay, then you're going to just wrap and turn. Oh, I haven't done the cross front wrap and turn, so you're going to cross front and back around and knit. So you can do whatever short row, what method you want. We're just doing a short row heel. but I'll show you how to do the cross front wrap and turn, which is originally by Kate Winslow, the Answer Lady. Okay, so you're going to knit your way back the other direction. Okay, cross front, wrap back and around. Okay, then you're going to knit your way over till just before the last cross front wrap and turn, and you're going to do the same thing for the next one. Okay. Okay, I have decreased my way down to 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And there's all my wraps and turns. Alright. Now, I like to do things a little differently when doing short rows and stuff. I like to start on the peg I finished with when I actually knit over my wraps and turns, because I find you have less holes that show up rather than slip it and going back. And I'm pretty sure that's how Kate does it. She slips it. But I'm one who doesn't tend to do that. So I'm going to start with the peg I finished with and knit over 7. Then knit the 2 stitches together. Then starting with the peg I finished with, I'm going to knit over 8, and knit the 2 pegs together. Okay, I'm going to show you a couple more times, and then I'm going to tell you to go in and do your increases, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to continue on with the socks. So going to knit 9 at this point, and then knit 2 together, and then you work your way back. Okay, so here's our knit 9, and then knit 2 together. Start with the peg you finished with, then knit 10. I'll show you one more, and then let you pause the video and go in and finish up the increase on your heel, and then you knit 2 together. Alright, so pause the video, complete the increasing on your heel, and then we will go from there and be starting on our cuff, and that's when we'll go back to our formula. Okay, now we need to finish up, so we want to, this is our last cross front wrap and turn, and what I like to do is kind of wrap and turn the next to last peg, and that keeps the hole from being obvious on this side. Alright, and now I just want to knit all the way around, and when I get to my last cross front wrap and turn on the other half of the loom, I'm just going to knit those 2 over and keep going. Okay, there's my last wrap and turn. Knit those 2 stitches over, and then keep going and knit your way around, and knit those 2 pegs together. Alright, now you have just completed your heel. Okay, and the next section will be our cuff. Okay, and the cuff was supposed to be 6 inches, and so that would be an equation I didn't put in here, but I'll make sure I add it into the book. But anyway, you take your cuff measurement, which is 6 inches, and you times it by your rows per inch, which is 10. So it's going to be 60 rows. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing is 60 rows. So for my cuff, and I'm going to do a 2 by 2. Alright, so I'm now going to be going round and round, and I'm going to be doing a knit 2, purl 2 for 60 rounds. Okay, so that's your measurement for your cuff times your rows per inch gives you what you do for your cuff. Alright, so knit 2, purl 2. Alright, so pause the video and get your cuff done, and then I will show you the bind off method I use, and then I will show you how to go in and do a nice weave with your tail here so that you close in those holes that you have right there, okay, in between your toes, and we'll be weaving all that in. So pause the video, get your cuff done, and then we'll do our finishing touches. Okay, we're ready to finish up our sock. I've already started working on the toe, and I'll show you how to do that, and then flip it inside out and weave those ends in and everything. Now as for the bind off, and I like to do a modified bind off when working with a toe up, and this actually stems from Loom a hat, except she does an E-wrap and I do a flat knit. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to knit pegs 1 and 2 like you would normally do to do a bind off. Then you take that second stitch back to the first peg, toss the bottom loop over, and move it over one. Now, here's where it's different. You knit the first peg again, and then the second peg. Then you take that second stitch, move it back to the first peg, toss the bottom loop over, move that stitch over. It's very similar to a regular bind off, except you're going back and you're knitting that first peg. Pegs 1 and 2. Take that second stitch back, toss the bottom loop over, and move it over 1. Okay? So you want to do this all the way around as your bind off, and that'll complete that, and then you'll want to work your toe area where you clean up your holes and that kind of thing. Okay, and I'm going to show you how to do that from the outside. Alright, and then I'll tell you to pause the video and get your bind off done and get the outside done, and then we need to turn it inside out. So I've cut it already, and what I like to do is go ahead and stick a crochet hook up in there and go ahead and pull that tail through. Okay, and then I'm ready to want to close up my hole. As you can see, there is a hole. I can stick my finger in there, and it is not difficult to close up your hole. So what you want to do is you want to take and find your first, you'll see that it's kind of loose here. You want to go back to this one so that you have that one there to cover up that looser stitch. So you want to weave that through. Then you want to come around and twist around, and you want to find your next column, which would be right in here, and you want to pull that through, and then you want to come over to the other side, find your next column that you can pull through, and pull that through. And then you want to find your last column and pull that through. And then what I do is 2 chains, 1, to pull through, and then I like to pull and tighten down as far, and when you do 2, it'll give you a stopping point. It's usually really close to the base. And then I like to snip off a little excessive amount and then weave in. So send that through a hole. And you're going to do that with every single foot, okay? And then you'll turn it inside out and weave them in so that they don't come out or anything, and you don't feel them in the toes, alright? And I'll show you how to do that. But go ahead and pause the video, finish your bind off, and then turn your sock inside out, and I'll show you how to go in and do the weaving process, okay? Okay, I have turned the sock inside out. I finished my bind off, turned the sock inside out. I've already done most of my weaving. I'm going to show you how to do the weaving in, and so you know how to do that. So the trick is to not go in one direction but all over the place, and that keeps it from moving too much. So I usually go to one direction a little bit, then I go diagonal in the other direction, kind of sharp back the other direction. And go back up. So that when I stretch out, it needs to be sit down one. To kind of weave it all over the place. Okay, there. And I could probably weave it down one more time. There. Okay. And then you do the same thing up here where you kind of are weaving it all different directions. It's not sideways, it's not down, it's kind of sideways a little, diagonally a little, opposite direction a little. So, you know, that's kind of what I'm doing, is all over the place. And that's how it's actually supposed to be done, because if you do it in one direction or the other, it's easy for it to get all funky, and if you have a lot that's excessive, you can just trim it down. Alright, I think that does it. Now, time to flip it right side out, and there you have it. How to make a toe sock using the wedge method. Now, you follow the same formula, and you kind of want to do it like my other video, where you can do it in a round loom. You just kind of have to sew up the whole end, and you have to calculate in for a seam and all that. And so I personally don't think it comes up quite as nice as doing it this method. Okay. And there you go. There is your toe sock with heel and ankle. And that is how you do your toe sock with wedges. Okay? So really quick close up, not taking much, weaving in the ends and everything, and that's how you do it. And you want to follow the same formula if you want to do it on a round loom. You can do this method on a round loom. I find it a little bit more tedious and a lot more to keep up with. It's like I have a video for how to do gloves on the round loom, But in all honesty, when it comes to being able to work with wedges like these, I like it. I like it better because you don't have to worry about so much. You just have to worry about closing up these areas and the tips, and it's just so much easier. Alright, so that is how you make a toe sock.